I have many stories to tell. One of intrigue, one of mystery, one of sci-fi, one of fantasy. Words, and it's not always the case. Let me tell you a story.
Hey everyone, you're watching the Esperanza 243. I do believe I am back. I don't know how often I'm going to be able to do this, but I am going to make sure that my computer will be fixed in the next few weeks. I promise you that. I am determined to get it fixed. Because one, I really need to start doing my dedication to you all. And two, the new Need to Do game is about to be shipped to me. I really need my computer working for that too. Because honestly, I mean, I wouldn't mind going to my sister's house to play the game with her. But we try to make sure to keep things a little bit competitive. Anyways, I believe with the book Aquatica, as it is now called, not Part of Your World, as I have probably previously stated. And so I believe in part 3, I don't quite remember what happened in part 3, I don't have the pages for it, but I do believe we ended part 3 with Garnette realizing that she's a mermaid, and she actually found this underwater cave. She actually found this underwater cave, which happens to be stories below this lighthouse that is on a cliff. This lighthouse that's on top of the cliff. I can't really remember how many stories up it was above sea level, but that is where your imagination comes in. So let's get to the book then. Marion was upset and worried that she didn't feel like driving to her new apartment. She fell asleep on her cousin's side of the hotel room. Kaylee sat in a chair looking at Garnette's new shells for her collection. That was when one of the shells started to... Was it vibrating? She stared at the shell. Kaylee didn't know what to do, but she ended up slowly taking the shell. She could hear weird noises from the shell. Placing it close to her ear, it made her able to understand part of the noises. It sounded like someone hiccuping every few seconds. Kaylee gasped as she heard words coming from the shell. Why, Mom? She could barely hear her, but she knew those were the words. Oh my gosh, she whispered. The hiccuping slowed down. Hello? She heard. Is someone there? Kaylee's eyes widened. Hello? She said carefully. Can you hear me? The person who was hiccuping realized it was coming from a shell and placed it close to her ear. Who is this? My name is Garnette. Who's this? She heard. Garnette? Where are you, dear? Mom? What's going on? How is this happening? Kaylee looked at her sleeping daughter. Garnette, I need to talk to you in person. Do you remember those rocks on the left side of the beach? Let's meet there. It was quiet for a long time. Garnette didn't know what to do. No, Mom. Let's meet at the lighthouse. Her aunt widened her eyes. How are you going to get there? It's above water. I'll figure it out. I'll meet you there in 30 minutes. She put down the shell and headed out of the underwater cave she found. Garnette! Garnette! Marion stirred. She began to wake. Miss Tarleton stood and walked to her. She put her hand on Marion's shoulder. Marion, I'll be back in an hour or two. I need to take care of something. She was still sleepy, so she went back to sleep. Look at you, she gaped. Your legs, they're back. Kaylee was excited. How? What happened? She looked at Garnette. She saw her niece wasn't covered, so she offered her shirt. Garnette took it and put it on. The shirt covered her down to the waist. She shook her head. I was swimming back to the beach, where the rocks were. I decided to try to get out of the ocean, but it was hard. I guess my arms are not as strong as I thought. I was so worn out, I had to rest. After I was dry, I tried getting up. That's when I realized my legs were back. Garnette sighed. I guess mermaids can go ashore. Miss Tarleton gasped. I guess mermaids can go ashore. Then that means you can come home whenever you want, she said. She looked at her. What do you think? Do you want to go back to the hotel? Kaylee gave her a questioning look. It's your choice. You could even come back tonight. Get some good sleep for the ocean tomorrow. Garnette looked out at the ocean and back to her aunt. She sighed. I don't know, Mom. Now that I'm part mermaid, I feel like I belong in the ocean. I can't abandon it altogether. She paused, feeling the call of the ocean. I have this strange feeling that if I leave, I might not be able to go back as a mermaid, ever. She closed her eyes and sighed nervously. I should have known you would want to stay in the ocean, Kaylee whispered. She sighed and shook her head. Kaylee smiled, putting her hand on her niece's knees. Whatever you choose, Nettie, I will support you no matter what. Really? Her aunt nodded. She moved closer and gave Kaylee a hug. I love you so much, Mom. While she hugged Garnette, a tear came down her cheek. Your mother would be so proud of you, she whispered. Kaylee gently kissed her cheek. Garnette pulled away. She looked confused and stunned. Mom, what are you talking about? She watched her aunt sigh. You said I wasn't adopted. You lied? She shook her head fiercely. I didn't lie. Your mom died soon after you were born. She said if anything happened, she wanted me to take care of you. I'm your aunt. Garnette's eyes were wide. Her mouth dropped. There were times when I wanted to tell you. I really wanted to tell you. I thought it would be best to wait until you're 16 or 18. Her words submit her niece to silence. She didn't know what to think. The first thing that popped in her mind, though, was her family. Is Marion my sister? She's your cousin, dear. What about Dad? Is he... Her confused eyes glanced at her. Kaylee smiled. He's your father. That would mean Patrick isn't just my brother. He's also my cousin? Her aunt hesitated and bit her bottom lip. Wait! You and Dad... She became confused and frustrated. You and Dad married. How could you? And then have a child? Why? Kaylee felt hurt. She had to stay quiet to figure out what to say. We lived together after you were born. Not until you turned 2 did we decide to get married. At first, your father and I thought it was the right thing to do." She paused to sigh. "I guess with Amber gone, after a while I started falling in love with him. He had a hard time not being with your mother. They really were meant for each other." She paused once more. "A year or 2 after we married, your father, I think he wanted to clear his mind. He started talking about adopting a child." Garnette gasped. "Oh my gosh, Patrick was adopted?" Her aunts nodded. Kaylee eyed her niece. She had a soft smile on her face. "You know, you are just like your mother," she whispered. Garnette looked at her. "Really? How?" She looked eager. "Well, she had 2 natural hair colors, like you. Instead of brown and red, it was black and red-orange." She smiled. "You have her face shape." She ate salt almost all the time. She wouldn't drink salt water, but she would eat it with ice cream. Garnette made a face. "I know. She also loved to swim. I remember trying to find her one time. I found her swimming in an indoor pool, except she didn't have her top on." Her brows rose. Garnette gasped and giggled. "Wow, now I know I'm not the only one who did that. Does she ever get to swim in the ocean?" Miss Tarleton thought for a moment and then raised her brows again. "Amber only saw the ocean once. Never got in." "That's my mom's name?" Nettie thought. She then realized she and her mother had gem names. "I'm not surprised." "How come?" she asked with curiosity. "I never could figure it out." Kaylee paused as she tried to remember. "Now that I think about it, when we used to share a room, she would have these nightmares. It was always about storms. At least I think they were storms." She scoffed. "Anyways, whenever she tried telling her nightmares, it sounded like it was part of a memory she once lived through." "What were the nightmares about?" "Well, let's see if I can remember." She thought hard. "It was always the same thing. Only once did it start differently. It was raining really hard." Like right now." "She was actually in the water, only your mom was a young thing. She saw a ship, and it was tossing back and forth in the storm. Lightning struck, and the whole ship was sinking. She dove into the water to get closer to it." She paused. As her brows narrowed. What happened next?" Garnette asked curiously. "This next part always confuses me. There's someone else in the water. He calls her name. She barely hears him, but she turns and sees the guy. He holds out his hand. The sound of the lightning and thunder drowned out his voice. Then the waves crash into her. That's when your mom usually wakes up." "It's so strange. It does seem like it's part of a memory." Nettie thought for a while. "Did Mom ever try to remember the ship's name?" Miss Tarleton widened her eyes. "Why didn't we think of that?" She paused for a moment and then sighed. "Even if anyone asked her, she wouldn't remember. she would only remember how frightened she was. If I recall right, she would always say that she felt her family or someone abandoned her. Garnette glanced at her aunt and then downward. Her eyes started to fill with tears. I don't want you or Marion to think I'm abandoning you. You're the only family I have, she whispered. Her aunt nodded. Garnette glanced out toward the city and saw the sun. The sun was in the middle of setting. Night would soon begin, though the moon was already over the horizon. Kaylee gasped. Garnette, your wrists! Those weird scales are back, she whispered. Nettie looked down and saw the same thing. I must be turning back into a mermaid, she assumed correctly. I keep stuttering. Garnette, Aunt Kaylee hesitated. Garnette looked at her. Do you want to come back to the hotel, or do you want to stay in the ocean? Garnette panicked, her wide eyes fixed on her aunt. What? You still want me to stay? Are you sure? Miss Tarleton nodded. It's your choice, though. I don't want to force you in any way. Tears came down Garnette's cheeks. She gave her a big hug. I love you, Mom, she whispered. Her aunt hugged her tightly. But I feel like this is one adventure I shouldn't miss. Kaylee nodded. Take care of yourself. Stay away from sharks, you hear? They pulled apart. Garnette giggled and pulled off the shirt, giving it back. I will. Take my shells, will you? I'll keep that shell I talked to you on, so we can communicate. Her aunt nodded. She got up and walked to the edge of the cliff. She turned her head toward Kaylee. Give Marion a shell. Tell her I'll call her by noon. I want to tell her what you told me. Kaylee nodded again, gently shooing her away. Garnette's hips and legs shined like the moon, yearning to be touched by the ocean. Garnette turned back to the ocean and sighed nervously. The land level was really high from the ocean. She dived off the edge. She flipped and twirled in the air before landing in. Her mermaid tail magically appeared. Her aunt put her shirt back on, turned, and headed back to the hotel. When she arrived, Marion was awake and worried. Kaylee calmed her down and told her about Garnette, giving her a shell. We'll be able to communicate with her through these. I'm taking the rest home. Wait, what about her things? What should we do with them? I don't know. We'll have to talk to her about that. Garnette will try to call you tomorrow around noon. Do you think you'll be awake by then? Marion thought for a while. She sighed. I sure hope so. I want to make sure I have my bathroom things and clothes unpacked before I go to bed. Thank goodness the apartment had some furniture. Thank goodness the apartment has some furniture, she responded. Thanks again, Mom, for driving the van here. When did you leave anyway? Her mom smiled. I left soon after I arrived home from work. I noticed the van was still in the garage, and since I already have my stuff packed... You're amazing. Then she remembered her other suitcase. Oh, did you happen to pack one of my suitcases in the van? Kaylee gasped. I thought I packed one too many suitcases in the van. It should be somewhere in the back seat. I had to rearrange everything to fit in. They laughed. Marion got her things and drove the van to her new apartment. Miss Tarleton looked at the shells one last time and lied down on the bed. She put a hand on one of the shells to call her niece, but she soon fell asleep. She was sleeping soundly, her hand still on one of the shells. Meanwhile, Garnette was swimming around the area where the shallow waters went deeper, meeting the ocean. She tried to think of what to do next. Going farther than the deep waters scared her a bit. She thought of going back to the waterlogged tunnel she found. It was the only place she could find nearby. She was tired, and the night went dark after the moon hid behind some clouds. Garnette admitted defeat and went back to the tunnel. Looking at her shell, she saw it was vibrating and making weird noises. She picked it up to listen in. What she heard, she soon recognized. It was her Aunt Kaylee sleeping. Garnette circled around and then curled up on the tunnel's floor. She soon fell asleep to the rhythm of the ocean coming up against the rock wall. Garnette groaned and opened one eye. Light shined into the tunnel. She looked toward it as she opened her other eye. Groaning again, she tried to go back to sleep. It was just the sun shining through the ocean waters. She could still hear the rhythm of the ocean hitting that rock wall. Then she heard bubbling sounds. She cocked her head to listen. And that is where I'm going to stop. Alright. I am going to try to edit this even though it's on my iPod. Maybe there's some way of editing it on YouTube. I'm not sure. We'll see. But anyways, that is part 4. Next will be up. Next video will be part 5. That one I might be able to upload by next week. Who knows? This is Thursday though. Anything can happen. But I will not be able to upload anything for the rest of this week, I should say. Or at least not Aquatica related, I should say. If there's anything I upload on, if there's anything that I'm going to be uploading, it'll probably be from the convention I'm going to. I am so psyched. This is my first sci-fi convention. Sci-fi fantasy convention. I am so freaking excited. I signed up for a writer's critique workshop. I really hope they picked mine. I don't know. They haven't notified me at all. But I do hope they pick mine. They're actually gonna pick, I think it said 12 people? 12 stories? I'm really excited. I already went through, the schedule of what's going on, picked out which stuff I'm gonna do for every hour. Anyways, I'm gonna have a bunch of fun. I hope you guys too, even though you're not gonna be at the convention. I'm definitely going to be bringing some books that I used to read a long time ago, because the author who wrote them is going to be there. Tamora Pierce. Yeah! Anyways, I will see you all later. This is the Esperanza 2 for 3, signing out.